Download this code from codegive.com, link in the description below. Clean architecture, understanding the presentation layer. Clean architecture is a software design philosophy that prioritizes separation of concerns, making the system easier to maintain, test, and scale. It emphasizes the independence of frameworks, UI, databases, and external agencies. The architecture is usually depicted in concentric circles, where entities, business rules, core of the application. Use cases, application-specific business rules. Interface adapters, presenters, controllers, gateways. Frameworks and drivers, UI, database, web frameworks, etc. The purpose of the presentation layer. The presentation layer is responsible for the user interface and user experience. It interacts with the user and formats data sent to and from the use cases layer. The presentation layer should be decoupled from the business logic, allowing for easy modifications of the UI without impacting the core application logic. Responsibilities of the presentation layer. 1. Display data, show information to the user. 2. Take user input, accept user actions and inputs. 3. Communicate with use cases, call the appropriate use cases to perform actions based on user input. 4. Format data, prepare data for display or further processing. Code example. Let's create a simple example in a React application that follows clean architecture principles. Project structure. /src. /presentation. /components. /userlist.js. /hooks. /useuserlist.js. /domain. /entities. -user.js, /usecasses, -getuserlist.js, /data, /repositories, -userrepository.js, -app.js, -index.js. 1. Domain layer, entities and use cases. User.js, entity. JavaScript. //src/domain/entities/user.js. Class user. Constructor, ID, name. This.id equals ID. This.name equals name. Export default user. GetUserList.js, use case. JavaScript. //src/domain/usecasses/getuserlist.js. Import user repository from //data/repositories/user repository. Class getUserList. Constructor, user repository. This.user repository equals user repository. Async execute. Return await this.user repository.get all users. Export default get user list. 2. Data layer, repository. User repository.js. JavaScript. //src/data/repositories/user repository.js. Import user from //domain/entities/user. Class user repository. Async get all users. / simulate fetching data from an API. Return. New user, 1, Alice. New user, 2, Bob. New user, 3, Charlie. Export default user repository. 3. Presentation layer, components and hooks. UserList.js, component. JavaScript. //src/presentation/components/userlist.js. Import React from React. Const userList equals, users, equals. Return. ul. Users.map, user equals. Leaky equals user.id user.name/li. /ul. Export default user list. Use userlist.js, custom hook. JavaScript. //src/presentation/hook/use userlist.js. Import use effect, uses state from React. Import user repository from //data/repositories/user repository. Import get user list from //domain/usec as/get user list. Const use user list equals. Const users, set users equals uses state. Const user repository equals new user repository. Const get user list equals new get user list, user repository. Use effect, equals. Const fetch users equals async, equals. Const user list equals await get user list dot execute. Set users, user list. Fetch users. Get user list. Return users. Export default use user list. For main application entry point. app.js. JavaScript. //src/app.js. Import React from React. Import user list from ./presentation/components/user list. Import use user list from ./presentation/hook/use user list. Const app equals. Const users equals use user list. Return. div. h1 user list/h1. User list users equals users /div. Export default app. Summary. In this example, we have illustrated a simple implementation of clean architecture focusing on the presentation layer. The user list component serves as the UI, while the use user list hook interacts with the use cases to fetch user data. The use cases themselves are decoupled from the UI and rely on the repository for data, maintaining a clear separation of concerns. This structure allows for easier testing and maintenance, as changes in the UI do not affect the core business logic, and vice versa. You can swap out the UI framework, replace the data source, or change the business rules without significant refactoring of the entire application.